He heard a strange noise and went outside with his dog, only to find a little alien girl freezing. The wind howled like a wounded beast outside Evan's window, rattling the reinforced polymer panes of their prefab home. The outpost, that's what the human colonists called their settlement on Niflheim, was built to withstand the planet's brutal climate. But on nights like this, it felt like the whole structure might just give up and collapse. 12-year-old Evan Parker rolled over in bed, pulling his thermal blanket tighter around his shoulders. His mother had named the planet after some ancient Earth mythology about an ice realm, and damn if it wasn't accurate. Outside, temperatures regularly plummeted to negative 70 degrees Celsius, and that was during what passed for summer in this godforsaken place. "Shh, Max," Evan whispered as his German shepherd raised his head, ears perked. "Go back to sleep." But Max wasn't having it, the dog's intelligent brown eyes fixed on the front door, a low growl building in his throat. Scratch, scratch, thump. There it was again, the noise that had initially woken Evan. Probably those massive snow rats again, desperate for warmth and whatever scraps they could find. The local fauna had quickly learned that human dwellings meant heat and food. "Fine," Evan muttered, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "But if it's just another rat, you're not getting any treats tomorrow." Max bounded ahead as Evan pulled on his insulated slippers and shuffled toward the front door. His mother was working the night shift at the Thaw, the tavern she'd opened 3 years ago when they'd first arrived on Niflheim. It was the only place in the outpost where the 50-odd colonists could pretend they weren't stranded on an ice ball at the ass end of the galaxy. Evan punched the security code into the panel beside the door, the metal barrier sliding open with a pneumatic hiss. A blast of frigid air immediately assaulted him, making his eyes water and his lungs seize. "Holy shit!" he gasped, the words forming visible clouds in the doorway. It wasn't a snow rat. Huddled against the exterior wall, arms wrapped tightly around herself, was a girl. At least Evan thought it was a girl. Her skin was a deep azure blue, almost luminescent against the stark white of the snow. Short white hair, frosted with ice crystals, framed a delicate face with features that were almost human, but not quite. Her eyes, when they flicked up to meet his, were a startling electric blue, with no visible pupils or irises, just pools of glowing cobalt. She couldn't have been older than Evan, and she was clearly freezing to death. Her slender body was clad in some kind of tight-fitting purple material that looked wholly inadequate for Niflheim's climate. Frost had formed along the seams of the garment, and her blue lips were trembling uncontrollably. Max, contrary to his usual wariness of strangers, immediately approached the alien girl, whining softly. He began licking her face and hands, as if trying to warm her with his tongue. "Jesus," Evan breathed, momentarily frozen in shock before his brain kicked back into gear. "Get inside, quick." The girl didn't move either from fear or because she was too cold. Evan hesitated only a second before grabbing her arm. Her skin was alarmingly cold, even through the material of her suit, and pulling her gently inside. Max followed, nudging at her legs as if hurting her. The door slid shut behind them, cutting off the howling wind. In the sudden silence, Evan could hear the girl's teeth chattering. "Mom!" he called out before remembering his mother wasn't home. "Shit. Okay, stay here." He ran to the storage closet, pulling out every thermal blanket they owned, then grabbed his mother's emergency med kit from under the sink. When he returned, the alien girl had sunk to the floor, her back against the wall, still shivering violently. Max had curled up beside her, pressing his warm body against hers. "Here," Evan said, wrapping the thickest blanket around her shoulders. "Can you understand me? Do you speak English?" The girl nodded weakly, her glowing eyes fixed on his face. "What's your name? What happened to you? How did you get here?" The questions tumbled out as Evan activated a heat pack from the med kit and pressed it into her hands. The girl just shook her head, clutching the heat pack like it was the most precious thing in the universe. A single tear escaped from one of those strange blue eyes, immediately freezing on her cheek. Okay. No questions right now," Evan said, feeling like an idiot. "Let's just get you warm." He was helping her to the couch when the front door slid open again, admitting his mother along with another blast of Arctic air. Sarah Parker stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. Her son, a blanket-wrapped alien with blue skin, and their dog all huddled together on the living room couch. Evan James Parker, she said slowly, the door automatically closing behind her. You have exactly 5 seconds to explain what the hell is going on. Mom, please, Evan pleaded, standing between his mother and the trembling alien girl. She was freezing to death out there. Sarah Parker ran a hand through her wind-tousled hair, her expression softening as she looked at the pitiful creature huddled on her couch. 10 years on Niflheim had hardened her. You didn't survive as a single mother on a frontier ice planet by being soft, but she wasn't heartless. All right, she sighed, setting down her work bag, but tomorrow we're taking her to Colonial Administration. They need to know about any non-humans on planet. The alien girl's eyes widened with unmistakable terror. She clutched the thermal blanket tighter, shaking her head violently. Mom, look at her! She's terrified, Evan said. Sarah approached slowly, crouching down to the girl's eye level. Hey there! I'm Sarah. Can you tell us your name? The girl's lips moved, but no sound came out. She looked frustrated, then closed her eyes in concentration. When she opened them again, they were glowing more intensely than before. Evan gasped as a cold sensation washed over him. Not physical cold, but something deeper, like a chill seeping directly into his mind. Beside him, his mother stiffened. Suddenly, images flashed through his consciousness. A small settlement, buildings of unfamiliar design nestled in a valley between ice-covered mountains. Blue-skinned people moving about their daily lives. A family, mother, father, the girl, and a younger sibling, sharing a meal. Then darkness, strange ships descending from the sky, tall insectoid creatures with multiple limbs and chitinous exoskeletons, wielding weapons that emitted pulses of sickly green energy. Screaming, running. The girl's mother pushing her into a small transport pod, her father fighting off the insectoid attackers. A flash of green light and her parents collapsing. The pod door sealing, ejection. The settlement growing smaller below as the pod ascended. Then the sickening lurch as it was struck by weapons fire and sent spiraling toward the distant lights of the human outpost. Crawling from the wreckage. Cold, so cold. Lights in the distance. Walking, falling, getting up, walking more. Then, a door. Warmth inside. A boy and his dog. The images faded, leaving Evan dizzy and disoriented. Beside him, his mother had gone pale, one hand pressed against her mouth. My God, Sarah whispered. Those were Vespids. They're supposed to be confined to the Cygnus sector after the treaty. The alien girl was watching them intently, clearly exhausted from the mental effort of sharing her memories. Laura, she finally said aloud, her voice soft and melodic despite the obvious strain. My name is Laura. Laura, Evan repeated, testing the name. I'm Evan. This is my mom, Sarah, and that's Max. The dog's tail thumped at the mention of his name. You're safe here, Laura, Sarah said, her decision clearly made. The Vespids won't find you. But I need to report this to Colonial Security. If they're violating the treaty, attacking settlements... Laura's face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. This time, Evan felt a gentler mental touch. Not images, but emotions. Gratitude, relief, and overwhelming grief. It's okay, he said, awkwardly patting her shoulder. You can stay with us. Sarah nodded, though her expression remained troubled. I'll make up the spare room. Evan, find her something warm to wear. Those clothes aren't suitable for Niflheim. As his mother left to prepare the guest room, Evan rummaged through his drawers, finding his smallest thermal pajamas and a pair of thick socks. Here, he said, offering them to Laura. They'll be too big, but they're warm. Laura took the clothes with a grateful nod. She seemed to understand the concept of privacy as she looked around questioningly. Bathrooms through there, Evan pointed. Do you, need help? She shook her head, managing a small smile that transformed her face, making her look less alien and more like a normal girl who'd been through something terrible. While Laura changed, Evan sat on the couch, petting Max absently. His mind was still reeling from the telepathic experience. The images of the attack had been horrifying, but what struck him most was how human her feelings had been. The love for her family, the terror of watching them die, the desperate will to survive. When Laura emerged from the bathroom, she was swimming in his pajamas, the sleeves and pant legs rolled up multiple times. Despite everything, Evan couldn't help but laugh at the sight. After a moment of confusion, Laura's lips curved upward, and a sound like tinkling bells escaped her. She was laughing too. Sarah returned to find them both giggling, Max dancing excitedly around them, feeding off their sudden mirth. "Well," she said, her own smile breaking through her worry, "that's a good sign. Come on, Laura, your room is ready." As they led their unexpected guest to the spare bedroom, Evan felt a strange certainty settling over him. Laura had lost everything, but somehow he knew she'd found a new home. On this frozen world where humans were the aliens, they just expanded their family by one. "Good night," he said as Laura climbed into bed, Max immediately jumping up to curl beside her. The dog had clearly appointed himself her personal guardian. Laura's voice came softly in response, her pronunciation careful. "Good night. Thank you." As Evan closed the door, he caught his mother's expression, a mixture of concern and resignation. "We're really keeping her, aren't we?" he whispered. Sarah sighed, ruffling his hair. "For now, but Evan, this changes everything. If the Vespids are back, we're all in danger." Evan nodded solemnly, but as he returned to his own bed, his last thought before sleep claimed him wasn't of danger or alien invaders. It was of Laura's smile and how human it had looked, despite her blue skin and glowing eyes. "Last call, folks." Evan's voice carried across the thaw, now the most popular establishment in what had grown from the modest outpost into Niflheim colony. "Drink up or take it home." At 22, Evan Parker had filled out into the kind of man who turned heads. Years of hauling supply crates and maintaining equipment in Niflheim's punishing gravity had sculpted his body into something that resembled the ancient Greek statues in his mother's history books. His dark hair was kept short on the sides but longer on top, practical for the cold climate, but still stylish enough to earn appreciative glances from the colony's female population. Not that he noticed those glances much. His attention was usually elsewhere. Behind the bar, Laura moved with fluid grace, her blue skin shimmering under the tavern's warm lighting. Her white hair, now grown to shoulder length, was pulled back in an intricate braid that highlighted her delicate facial features and those extraordinary eyes that still glowed with inner light when her emotions ran high. "You said that 10 minutes ago," she called back to Evan, her melodic voice carrying a teasing lilt. "Are you actually going to enforce it this time, or just stand there looking intimidating?" A decade on Niflheim had perfected her English, though her accent still carried exotic undertones that most humans found enchanting. The regulars laughed, used to the playful banter between the two. "I mean it this time," Evan insisted, crossing his arms over his broad chest. "Mom will kill me if we're open past midnight again." "Your mother," came Sarah Parker's voice from the doorway to the back office, "is right here and perfectly capable of enforcing her own rules." Despite the stern words, her expression was fond as she surveyed the tavern she'd built from nothing. "But he's right. Finish up, everyone. Storm's coming in faster than predicted." That got people moving. Niflheim's storms were legendary. Walls of ice and wind that could strip the flesh from your bones if you were caught outside. The patrons quickly downed their drinks and bundled up, filing out into the night where the wind was already picking up. As the last customer left, Evan locked the door and turned to find Laura watching him, her head tilted slightly in that way that still reminded him she wasn't human, despite how familiar she'd become. "You've been distracted all night," she said, not a question, but an observation. After 10 years of living together, they could read each other better than most. Evan shrugged, moving to help her clean up the bar. "Just thinking about the Security Council meeting tomorrow. Commander Hayes says they've detected unusual activity at the edge of the system." Sarah's expression tightened. "Vespids?" "They don't know yet," Evan replied. "Could be nothing. Could be traitors. Could be." He didn't need to finish. The Vespid threat had hung over Niflheim for a decade, ever since Laura had arrived with her memories of the massacre. Colonial security had investigated, finding the remains of her settlement and confirming her story. The insectoid species had apparently retreated after the attack, but everyone knew they could return. "I should be at that meeting," Laura said quietly, her eyes beginning to glow with emotion. "My people were the first victims. If they're coming back..." "Hayes specifically requested you attend," Sarah assured her. Your telepathic abilities could be useful if they've captured any reconnaissance footage. Loera nodded, though her expression remained troubled. Over the years, her telepathic powers had grown stronger, more controlled. What had once been an instinctive sharing of memories had developed into a refined skill that made her invaluable to colonial security. "Go home, you two," Sarah said, waving them off. "I'll finish closing up, and take Max with you. He's been whining at the back door for the last hour." The aging German shepherd perked up at his name, trotting over from his warm spot by the kitchen. Despite his gray muzzle, he still moved with surprising energy, especially around Loera, whom he'd appointed himself protector of since that first night. Outside, the wind had picked up considerably, driving ice crystals that stung any exposed skin. Evan pulled his thermal hood tighter, watching as Loera did the same. Their home, still the same prefab unit from 10 years ago, though considerably expanded, was only a 5-minute walk from the thaw, but in this weather it would feel longer. "Race you!" Loera suddenly called, taking off through the swirling snow. Max barked excitedly, bounding after her. Evan laughed and gave chase. This was another tradition between them, spontaneous races through Niflheim's harsh landscape, a game that had started when they were children and somehow never stopped, even as they grew into adults. He caught up to her just as they reached their front door, both of them breathless and laughing. Snow clung to Loera's eyelashes, making them sparkle in the light from the entry panel. "You cheated," he accused, grinning. "Head start." "You're just slow," she teased back, her eyes glowing brighter with amusement. Something in the air between them shifted, as it had been doing more frequently lately. The laughter faded, replaced by a different kind of tension. Evan found himself acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the way Loera's breath formed small clouds in the cold air, of how her eyes seemed to be searching his face for something. Max broke the moment, pushing between them to nose at the door, clearly done with the cold. Inside, they shed their outer layers in comfortable silence. The home they shared with Sarah had become a blend of human practicality and touches of Loera's native culture. Artifacts she'd recovered from expeditions to her destroyed settlement, arranged according to her people's traditions. "Tea?" Evan offered, moving toward the kitchen. "Please." As he prepared the hot drinks, Evan felt Loera's presence behind him, closer than usual. When he turned, mugs in hand, she was right there, those luminous eyes fixed on his face with an intensity that made his heart skip. "Evan," she said softly, "I've been thinking." "Dangerous pastime," he quipped automatically. Their old joke. She didn't smile. "We've known each other for 10 years. We've grown up together, shared everything." "Almost everything," he corrected, suddenly finding it hard to breathe normally. "Yes," she agreed. "Almost." The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken possibilities. They'd been dancing around this for months, maybe years. The lingering touches, the looks that lasted too long, the way they gravitated toward each other in any room. "Loera?" Evan began, setting the mugs down on the counter before he dropped them. "What are you saying?" She took a step closer, eliminating the already small distance between them. Her scent, something like winter berries and ozone, filled his senses. "My people have a belief," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "When we survive something that should have killed us, we're given a second life. A gift, and we shouldn't waste it by denying ourselves what we truly want." Evan swallowed hard. "And what do you want?" In answer, Loera reached up, her blue fingers tracing the line of his jaw with exquisite gentleness. The touch sent electricity racing through his body, awakening feelings he'd been trying to suppress for longer than he cared to admit. "You," she said simply. "I want you, Evan Parker. I think I have for years." The confession hung in the air between them, changing everything and nothing all at once. Because deep down, Evan had known. Just as he'd known his own feelings, buried beneath layers of propriety and uncertainty. "I want you too," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "But I wasn't sure if we're different species, Loera." She laughed softly, the sound like wind chimes. "Do you think I haven't researched human biology? We're compatible enough where it matters." The bluntness of her statement, so typical of Loera's practical approach to life, made him laugh too, breaking some of the tension. "Is that so?" he murmured, finally allowing himself to touch her, his fingers brushing a strand of white hair from her face. And when exactly were you conducting this research? For years, she admitted, leaning into his touch. I wanted to be sure before I said anything, before I did this. She rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, exploratory, but quickly deepened as years of restrained desire broke free. Her lips were cooler than a human's would be, but soft and yielding, moving against his with increasing urgency. Evan's arms encircled her waist, pulling her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him, despite their physical differences. Her hands slid up his chest to his shoulders, then into his hair, her touch igniting fires everywhere she made contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Evan rested his forehead against hers. Are you sure about this? He asked, needing to hear it one more time. Laura's eyes were glowing so brightly they cast blue shadows across her face. I've never been more certain of anything, she whispered. Have you? Instead of answering with words, Evan kissed her again, pouring 10 years of friendship, trust, and growing love into the gesture. Outside, the storm howled against the walls of their home, but inside they had created a warmth that no Niflheim winter could touch. Max, sensing he was no longer needed, padded off to his bed in the corner with a contented sigh, leaving the two to discover what they'd both been waiting for all along. Evan woke to the gentle hum of the environmental systems and the soft blue glow emanating from the woman beside him. Loera was still asleep, her white hair splayed across the pillow, her azure skin luminescent in the dim light of dawn. Last night had been transcendent. Different anatomies had presented interesting challenges, but they'd navigated them with laughter and tenderness, discovering a compatibility that went beyond the physical. He traced a finger lightly along her shoulder, marveling at the subtle patterns in her skin, swirls and whirls that became visible only in certain light, like bioluminescent fingerprints. Laura stirred, her eyes fluttering open, that electric blue gaze immediately finding his. Good morning, she murmured, a smile spreading across her face. Morning, he replied, leaning down to kiss her. Sleep well? Better than I have in years. She stretched languidly, the sheet sliding down to reveal more of that fascinating blue skin. Though I'm not sure sleep was the primary activity last night. Evan laughed, pulling her closer. Any regrets? Only that we waited so long. She nestled against his chest, her cooler body temperature a pleasant contrast to his warmth. Your heart beats faster than mine, she observed, placing her palm over it. It's fascinating. Everything about you is fascinating, he countered, running his fingers through her silky hair. The tender moment was interrupted by the insistent beeping of their comm units. Simultaneously, they reached for their devices on opposite bedside tables. Security Council meeting in 1 hour, Evan read aloud, groaning. I forgot about that. As did I, Loera admitted, sitting up. We should hurry. They shared the shower, another new experience that threatened to make them very late indeed, before dressing quickly in their official colonial security uniforms. Evans was the standard dark blue with silver trim, denoting his rank as lieutenant, while Loera's was modified with the green shoulder flash that identified her as a special consultant. Do you think your mother noticed you didn't sleep in your room? Loera asked as they gulped down quick cups of synthesized coffee. Mom works late and sleeps later, Evan replied with a grin, but she's not blind. Or stupid. She's probably been expecting this for years. They made it to the Colonial Administration building with minutes to spare, hurrying through security checkpoints and down the utilitarian corridors. The council chamber was already filling with Niflheim's leadership when they arrived. Governor Gilbert, Security Commander Hayes, Chief Medical Officer Williamson, and the various department heads who comprised the colony's governing body. Sarah Parker was there too, representing the civilian business sector. She caught sight of them as they entered, her knowing smile confirming Evan's suspicion that their new relationship status wasn't going to be a surprise to her. Lieutenant Parker, Consultant Loera, Commander Hayes nodded as they took their seats. Glad you could join us. Hayes was a career military man, one of the original colonists who'd helped establish Niflheim's defenses after the Vespid threat became known. His weathered face bore the scars of many battles, both with Niflheim's environment and external threats. Now that we're all present, Governor Gilbert began, her stern expression setting the tone, let's get to the point. Commander Hayes, please, brief the council on the situation. Hayes stood, activating the holographic display in the center of the circular table. A three-dimensional map of the Niflheim system appeared, with several red dots blinking at its outer edges. At 0200 hours, our long-range sensors detected these vessels entering the system, Hayes explained. They're maintaining position just beyond the asteroid belt, but their configuration and energy signatures are consistent with Vespid scout ships. A murmur ran through the room. Evan felt Loera stiffen beside him, her hand finding his under the table. "Are we certain they're Vespids?" Dr. Williamson asked, leaning forward. "Could they be traders or explorers from another species?" "The energy signatures are unmistakable," Hayes replied grimly, "and they're running silent. No response to our hails. Traders announce themselves." "How many?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the obvious concern in her eyes. "5 that we can detect," Hayes said, "but Vespids are known for their stealth technology. There could be more." "What are they waiting for?" someone else asked. "Unknown, but they're positioned perfectly for surveillance. My assessment is they're gathering intelligence before deciding their next move." Governor Gilbert turned to Loera. "Consultant, you're our resident expert on Vespid behavior. What's your analysis?" All eyes turned to Loera, who stood with a composure that Evan knew masked inner turmoil. The memories of her family's massacre were never far from the surface. "Commander Hayes is correct. This is typical Vespid reconnaissance pattern," she confirmed. "They study potential targets thoroughly before attacking. Based on historical data, I'd estimate we have between 3 and 5 days before they make a move." 5 days to prepare for a potential invasion," Governor Gilbert said, her expression grim. "Recommendations?" "We evacuate non-essential personnel," Hayes said immediately. "The colony ship in orbit can take about 60% of our population to the nearest Terran outpost." "And leave 40% behind?" Sarah objected. "Unacceptable. We don't have enough ships for everyone," Hayes countered. "We prioritize children, medical cases, and those with critical knowledge that must be preserved." "What about our defenses?" Evan asked, trying to focus on practical matters, despite the knot of dread in his stomach. "The planetary shield has never been tested against a concentrated Vespid attack." "It's our best option," Hayes admitted. "That and the ground-based ion cannons. But if they bring a full battle fleet," he left the sentence unfinished, but everyone understood the implication. "There might be another way," Laura said suddenly, her eyes beginning to glow with intensity. "My people had been developing a countermeasure against Vespid weapons before our settlement was destroyed. I was too young to know the details, but I know where the research was stored." A charged silence fell over the room. "You never mentioned this before," Hayes said, his tone somewhere between accusation and hope. "Because it was theoretical," Loera explained. "And reaching the facility means crossing the shattered plains during storm season. It would be a suicide mission under normal circumstances." "But these aren't normal circumstances," Evan finished for her, already knowing where this was heading. "No," she agreed, meeting his gaze. "They're not." Governor Gilbert studied them both, then nodded decisively. "Lieutenant Parker, you and Consultant Loera will assemble a small team. Your mission is to retrieve this research and return before the Vespids make their move. Commander Hayes, begin evacuation preparations as a contingency." "Yes, Governor," Hayes acknowledged. "This meeting is adjourned," Gilbert announced. "May whatever gods you believe in watch over us all." As the council dispersed, Evan and Loera remained seated, the weight of their assignment settling over them. "The shattered plains in storm season," Evan murmured. "You weren't exaggerating about the suicide mission part." "No," Loera admitted. "But it's our best chance." She hesitated, then added, "I should have told you about the research facility sooner. I just never thought that the Vespids would find us," Evan finished. "None of us did. But they're here now, and we'll face them together." Sarah approached, concern etched on her features. "I don't like this plan," she said bluntly, "but I understand why it's necessary." She looked between them, her expression softening. "And I'm glad you two finally figured things out. Took you long enough." Evan felt his face heat up. "Mom." "Oh, please," Sarah scoffed. "The way you two have been looking at each other for years?" "I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner." Her expression grew serious again. "Just promise me you'll both come back." "We will," Laura assured her, though they all knew such promises were impossible to guarantee. As they left the council chamber to prepare for their mission, Evan squeezed Loera's hand. "Timing could have been better," he said wryly. "First night together, and now we're off to save the colony." "I don't know," Loera replied, a hint of that musical laughter in her voice despite the gravity of their situation. "Seems fitting somehow. Nothing about us has ever been conventional." Evan couldn't argue with that. As they headed toward the equipment bay to begin preparations, he found himself thinking that if anyone could beat impossible odds, it would be them. The human boy and the alien girl he'd once found freezing at his door, now united in ways neither could have imagined on that fateful night. "That's the last of the supplies," Evan announced, securing the cargo compartment of their terrain vehicle. The TV-7 Mammoth was the colony's most robust transport. 6 massive wheels with independent suspension, reinforced hull capable of withstanding Niflheim's most punishing conditions, and enough power to traverse nearly any terrain. Nearly. "The shattered planes will still test its limits," Captain Dean commented, running a final diagnostic on the vehicle's systems. The grizzled veteran had volunteered to drive, citing his experience with similar terrain on other frontier worlds. Their team was small but elite. Evan and Laura, Captain Dean, Dr. Morgan, the colony's xenobiologist who might be able to understand the research they were seeking, and Sergeant Torres, their security specialist. 5 people, one desperate mission. "We've got 72 hours before the next major storm front hits," Torres said, checking the weather projections one last time. "After that, nothing's getting across those plains for at least a week." "By which time the Vespids will likely have made their move," Dr. Morgan added grimly. Loera emerged from the equipment bay, dressed in the specialized cold weather gear they'd all been issued. Even with the thermal regulation, her blue skin had taken on a deeper hue, a sign of stress that Evan had learned to recognize over the years. "Ready?" he asked softly as she approached. She nodded, her eyes meeting his. "As I'll ever be." Sarah appeared, leading an aging but still alert Max on his leash. The German shepherd perked up at the sight of Loera, pulling toward her with surprising strength for his years. "He insisted on saying goodbye," Sarah explained, her attempt at humor not quite masking her worry. Loera knelt, wrapping her arms around the dog who had been her first friend on this world. "Watch over Sarah for us, old friend," she whispered into his fur. Max whined softly, licking her face as if he understood the gravity of the mission. Sarah hugged Evan fiercely, then Loera. "Come back to me," she said simply. "Both of you." "We will," Evan promised, hoping it wasn't a lie. The journey began under Niflheim's perpetually gray sky, the Mammoth's powerful engine growling as they left the colony's protective dome and headed east toward the shattered plains. For the first few hours, the terrain was familiar. Rolling ice fields and frozen lakes that the colonists had mapped extensively over the years. But as they approached the boundary of known territory, the landscape changed dramatically. Massive ice formations jutted from the ground at impossible angles, creating a maze of frozen spires and deep crevasses. This was the edge of the shattered plains, a vast expanse of fractured terrain created by the tectonic instability of this region. "My people called this place Koravesh," Laura said softly as they gazed out at the forbidding landscape. "The Broken Land." "Fitting name," Torres muttered from the gunner's position. Captain Dean slowed the Mammoth to a crawl as they entered the plains proper. The vehicle rocked violently as it navigated the uneven terrain, its advanced suspension working overtime to keep them level. "Navigation systems are already struggling," Dean reported. "Too much magnetic interference from the mineral deposits." "I can guide us," Laura said. "My people navigated these plains using visual markers." For hours, they inched forward through the treacherous landscape, Loera directing Dean based on landmarks only she could recognize. The temperature outside dropped steadily, even as the wind picked up, driving ice particles against the Mammoth's reinforced viewports with a sound like distant gunfire. By the time they stopped to rest, everyone was exhausted from the constant tension. They'd covered less than a third of the distance to their destination, and already the journey seemed nearly impossible. "We should reach the research facility by tomorrow evening if we maintain this pace," Loera said, studying their route on the holographic map. "If the weather holds," Torres added, eyeing the darkening sky. They ate a quick meal of high-calorie ration bars, then settled in for a few hours of rest. The Mammoth's interior was cramped with 5 people, but the shared body heat was welcome as the external temperature continued to plummet. Evan found himself unable to sleep, his mind racing with thoughts of the colony, the Vespids, and the woman curled against him in the narrow sleeping compartment they'd been assigned. Loera's breathing had slowed, but he could tell from the tension in her body that she wasn't asleep either. "What are you thinking about?" he whispered, careful not to disturb the others. "The last time I crossed these plains," she replied softly. "I was so young, barely remember it. My father carried me most of the way." Evan tightened his arm around her. "You never talk much about your parents." "It hurts less that way," she admitted, "but being here, it brings back memories." She shifted to face him in the darkness, her eyes glowing faintly. "My father was a scientist. He helped design the countermeasure we're seeking. My mother was what you might call a diplomat. She negotiated with other settlements, other species." "They sound remarkable," Evan said. "They were." Her voice caught slightly. "They would have liked you." Evan brushed a strand of white hair from her face. "I wish I could have met them." "They would have been impressed by humans," she continued. "Your adaptability, your determination. My people were more cautious. Perhaps if we'd been more like humans, we might have survived the Vespid attack. Or perhaps you'd have been wiped out sooner," Evan countered gently. "Different species, different strengths. That's why we're stronger together." Loera's cool fingers traced the contours of his face. "That's what my father believed. That cooperation between species was the key to survival in this galaxy." Her lips curved in a sad smile. "The research we're seeking, it wasn't just a weapon. It was designed to be shared, to protect all sentient life from the Vespids." The revelation added new weight to their mission. This wasn't just about saving Niflheim. It could potentially save countless worlds from the Vespid threat. "We'll find it," Evan promised. "We'll finish what your father started." Loera's response was to kiss him, a gesture of both gratitude and need. In the confined space with their companions sleeping nearby, they could do little more than hold each other, but somehow that simple connection felt more profound than their passionate night together had been. When morning came, or what passed for morning on Niflheim, they resumed their journey. The terrain grew increasingly treacherous, with ice bridges spanning yawning chasms and sudden sinkholes appearing without warning. Twice they nearly lost the mammoth to collapsing ice shelves, saved only by Dean's quick reflexes and the vehicle's remarkable traction system. By midday, Loera had grown unusually quiet, her skin taking on a peculiar, iridescent quality that Evan had never seen before. "Are you all right?" he asked during a brief stop to check their bearings. "Something's happening," she said, her voice strained. "I can feel the planes resonating somehow." Dr. Morgan overheard and approached, scanner in hand. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward Loera. She nodded and he ran the device over her, frowning at the readings. "Your cellular structure is changing," he said, showing her the display. "These patterns, they're similar to the crystalline formations in the ice around us." "My people evolved on this world," Loera explained, looking at her hands with fascination. "We have a connection to it that I've never fully understood. Being back in the plains, where the mineral concentration is highest." "You're adapting," Morgan said, excitement creeping into his voice. "Remarkable. Your physiology is literally harmonizing with the environment." "Is it dangerous?" Evan asked, concern evident in his tone. "I don't think so," Loera said slowly. "It feels right, like remembering something I'd forgotten." As they continued their journey, the change in Loera became more pronounced. Her movements grew more fluid, her reactions faster. When a sudden ice collapse threatened to crush Torres, Loera pulled him to safety with strength she'd never displayed before. "How did you do that?" Torres gasped, staring at her in amazement. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just could." That night, as another storm howled outside the mammoth, Evan held Loera close, marveling at the subtle luminescence that now pulsed beneath her skin, in rhythm with her heartbeat. "You're glowing," he murmured, tracing the patterns with his fingertip. "It's the minerals in the ice," and she explained. "They're present in my people's biology too, just usually dormant. Being here is awakening something ancestral." "Does it hurt?" "No," she said, smiling. "It feels like coming home." The realization that she was connecting with her heritage in ways she'd never experienced before filled Evan with both joy for her and a strange melancholy. Would this change what was between them? Would she still want a life with humans once she'd rediscovered her own people's legacy? As if sensing his thoughts, Loera placed her hand over his heart. "This doesn't change us," she whispered. "It just makes me more of who I was, always meant to be." In the soft glow of her luminescent skin, her eyes reflecting the same determination he felt, Evan believed her. Whatever changes this journey brought, they would face them together, just as they would face the Vespids, and whatever future lay beyond. The research facility loomed before them like a ghost from another time, a structure of sweeping curves and translucent materials that seemed to grow organically from the ice itself. Despite a decade of abandonment, it remained largely intact, protected by the same technology that had built it. "It's beautiful," Dr. Morgan breathed as they approached the entrance. "I've never seen architecture like this." "My people believed buildings should honor the landscape, not conquer it," Loera explained, her luminescent skin pulsing more intensely as they drew closer. "This was one of our most important scientific outposts." The entrance was sealed, its control panel dark and unresponsive. Loera placed her palm against it, closing her eyes in concentration. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if recognizing a long-lost child, the panel illuminated with a soft blue glow, and the massive doors slid silently open. "How did you do that?" Torres asked, impressed. "Genetic recognition," Loera said. "The facility remembers my people, even after all this time." They entered cautiously, weapons ready despite Loera's assurances that the facility was likely empty. The interior was a marvel of alien engineering, open spaces with flowing lines, illuminated by a soft ambient light that seemed to emanate from the structure itself. "The main research lab should be this way," Loera said, leading them down a corridor that spiraled gently downward. The lab, when they reached it, was a circular chamber dominated by a central console surrounded by what appeared to be data storage units. Laura approached reverently, her fingers hovering over the controls. "My father worked here," she whispered. "I can feel his presence somehow." She activated the system, and holographic displays sprang to life around them, filled with complex equations and schematics in a language only Loera could read. "The countermeasure," she confirmed, scanning the information. But her expression fell. "It's incomplete. The final integration protocols were never finished." "Can you complete them?" Evan asked, moving to her side. "I don't know. I'm not a scientist like my father." She studied the displays, her brow furrowed in concentration. "But there's something else here. Historical records." New images appeared, recordings of battles between Loera's people and the Vespids, dating back centuries. The insectoid species had been a threat long before the recent massacre, it seemed. "My God," Dr. Morgan said, watching the footage. "Your people fought them off before?" "Yes," Laura confirmed, her voice filled with wonder. "Many times. We were guardians of this sector, keeping the Vespids contained." She turned to Evan, her eyes wide. "We weren't just victims. We were warriors." The revelation seemed to transform her. The luminescence beneath her skin intensified, patterns shifting and flowing like liquid light. "There's more," she said, accessing deeper files. "Other settlements. Survivors. My people aren't extinct. They're scattered, hiding." Hope bloomed on her face, but it was quickly tempered by urgency as their comms unit crackled to life. "Lieutenant Parker," Commander Hayes' voice came through, distorted by interference. "Do you copy?" "We copy," Evan responded. "We've reached the facility." "The Vespids have moved," Hayes reported grimly. "They've launched their attack ahead of schedule. We're evacuating as many as we can, but our defenses won't hold for long." Evan looked at Loera, who was already working frantically at the console. "We found the countermeasure, but it's incomplete. We're working on it." "Work faster," Hayes urged. "You have less than 12 hours before they breach the planetary shield." The transmission cut out, leaving them in tense silence. "I need to finish this," Loera said, determination hardening her features. "But I'll need help." What followed was a desperate race against time. While Captain Dean prepared the Mammoth for their return journey and Torres secured the perimeter, Evan, Loera, and Dr. Morgan worked to complete the countermeasure. Loera's transformation continued as she immersed herself in her father's work. The mineral resonance of the shattered planes had awakened something in her genetic memory. knowledge and abilities that had lain dormant since childhood. "It's like I can hear him guiding me," she murmured as her fingers flew across the alien interface. "Like part of him lives on in this place, in these systems." Dr. Morgan provided insights from his xenobiological perspective, while Evan coordinated with the colony, relaying specifications for the delivery system they would need to build upon their return. Hours passed in a blur of focused work. Outside, the weather worsened, the howling wind a constant reminder of the treacherous journey that awaited them. Finally, Loera stepped back from the console, exhaustion and triumph mingling on her face. "It's done," she announced. "The countermeasure is complete." She transferred the data to a portable device, then hesitated, turning back to the console. "There's one more thing I need to do." Her fingers danced across the controls, sending a signal pulsing outward from the facility, a beacon that would reach far beyond Niflheim. "What was that?" Evan asked. "A call to arms," she explained, "to any of my people who survived. They'll know the Vespids have returned and that we found a way to fight them." "Will they come?" Dr. Morgan asked. "I don't know," Loera admitted, "but they deserve the chance to stand with us." They raced back to the Mammoth, the storm now in full fury around them. The return journey was even more perilous than their arrival, with visibility reduced to mere meters and ice formations collapsing all around them. Dean navigated with grim determination, while Loera used her newfound connection to the environment to sense dangers before they appeared. Twice her warnings saved them from catastrophe. As they neared the edge of the shattered plains, their comms crackled back to life. "Repeat, multiple Vespid ships have breached the outer defenses," a voice reported through heavy static. "All personnel to battle stations." "We're almost there," Evan transmitted back. "We have the countermeasure. Hold them off just a little longer." They emerged from the plains to a sky lit by weapons fire. Above the colony's protective dome, Vespid attack ships swarmed like angry insects, their green energy weapons pounding against the failing shields. "We'll never make it through that," Torres said, staring upward. "We have to try," Evan replied, his jaw set with determination. Laura placed her hand on his arm, her skin now pulsing with brilliant blue light. "I have an idea," she said, "but it's risky." "At this point, I'm open to anything," Evan told her. She explained quickly. The Mammoth's power core could be modified to emit a pulse based on the countermeasure's principles. It wouldn't stop the Vespids, but it might disrupt their weapons long enough for them to reach the colony. Dr. Morgan and Laura worked feverishly to make the modifications while Dean drove them closer to the besieged colony. When they were within 5 kilometers, Laura announced they were ready. "Everyone brace yourself," she warned. "This will drain our power completely. We'll have one shot at this." Evan took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "Do it." Loera activated the makeshift device. A wave of blue energy erupted from the Mammoth, expanding outward in all directions. Above them, the Vespid ships faltered, their weapons suddenly silent. "Now!" Evan shouted, and Dean gunned the engine, pushing the vehicle to its limits as they raced toward the colony's entrance. They made it inside just as the Vespid ships began to recover, the dome sealing behind them as green energy blasts resumed their assault. Inside the colony was organized chaos, civilians being evacuated to underground shelters, while colonial security forces manned defense positions. Sarah was there, coordinating the civilian response, Max at her side despite his age. The old dog barked joyfully at the sight of Evan and Laura, straining against his leash. "You made it," Sarah said, embracing them both with tears in her eyes. "Did you find it?" "We did," Evan confirmed, "but we need to implement it immediately." Commander Hayes met them at the defense center, his uniform scorched from a recent skirmish. "The shield is at 20%, he reported grimly. "We have maybe an hour before it fails completely." Loera connected the data device to the colony's main systems, bringing up the countermeasure schematics. "We need to reconfigure the shield generators to emit this specific frequency," she explained. "It will disrupt the Vespids' neural networks, rendering their weapons and ships inoperable." "Can we do that in an hour?" Hayes asked skeptically. "We have to," Evan replied. What followed was a desperate race against time, as engineers and technicians worked to implement the countermeasure. Loera directed them, her newfound confidence and knowledge guiding the process. As they worked, the first reports came in of Vespid ground forces breaching the outer perimeter where the shield had already failed. Colonial security engaged them in fierce combat, buying precious time for the countermeasure to be completed. "We're ready," Loera finally announced, her hands poised over the activation controls. Outside, the situation had grown dire. Vespid troops were advancing through the colony's outer sectors, their chitinous forms visible through the viewports as they methodically destroyed everything in their path. "Do it," Hayes ordered. Loera activated the countermeasure. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then a wave of blue energy pulsed outward from the shield generators, washing over the colony and beyond. The effect on the Vespids was immediate and dramatic. Their coordinated assault faltered as individual soldiers began to twitch and convulse, their neural networks disrupted by the precisely calibrated energy field. The ships above dropped from the sky like dead insects, crashing into the ice beyond the colony's boundaries. "It's working!" someone shouted, and a cheer went up from the defense center. But their celebration was premature. The countermeasure was straining the colony's power grid beyond its capacity. Alarms blared as systems began to overload. "We can't maintain this output," a technician reported frantically. "The grid is going to collapse." Loera's expression grew determined. "I can stabilize it," she said, placing her hands directly on the control console. The luminescence beneath her skin intensified, flowing out from her fingers into the colony's systems. "Loera, no!" Evan protested, realizing what she intended. "It could kill you." "Trust me," she said, her eyes meeting his. "This is what I was meant to do." Before he could stop her, the blue energy engulfed her completely, using her body as a conduit between the colony's power grid and the countermeasure. The strain was visible on her face, but she held firm, channeling the energy with precision born of her newly awakened heritage. Outside, the remaining Vespids were retreating, their forces in disarray, but the victory would mean nothing if the colony's systems collapsed. In that moment of crisis, something unexpected happened. New ships appeared in Niflheim's sky, sleek vessels with flowing lines similar to the architecture of the research facility. They positioned themselves in a defensive formation around the colony, their weapons targeting the fleeing Vespid ships. "It's my people," Loera gasped, her voice strained but triumphant. "They heard the call." The arrival of these unexpected allies turned the tide completely. The Vespids, already crippled by the countermeasure, were no match for the coordinated assault from Loera's people. Within minutes, the battle was over, the invaders either destroyed or in full retreat. As the immediate danger passed, Loera finally released her hold on the systems, collapsing into Evan's waiting arms. Her skin still glowed, but the intensity had dimmed, her energy nearly spent. "You did it," he whispered, cradling her against his chest. "You saved everyone." She smiled weakly. "We did it. Together. As it should be." In the days that followed, Niflheim changed forever. Representatives from Loera's people, the Luminari they called themselves, established diplomatic relations with the human colony. The scattered survivors of their once great civilization began to return to their ancestral home, bringing with them knowledge and technology long thought lost. The research facility in the Shattered Plains became a joint human Luminari scientific outpost, dedicated to developing defenses against the Vespid threat and exploring the unique properties of Niflheim that had shaped both species. And at the heart of this new alliance were Evan and Loera, their union a living symbol of what could be achieved when different species work together. Their home, once a simple prefab unit on the edge of a struggling colony, became a gathering place for humans and Luminari alike. One evening, as Niflheim's brief summer brought a rare clear sky, they stood together on the observation deck of the newly expanded colony, watching the aurora dance above them. "Do you ever regret it?" Evan asked, his arm around Loera's waist. "Finding me instead of your own people first?" Loera smiled, her skin glowing softly in the darkness. "Never," she said with certainty. "If Max hadn't licked my face that night, if you hadn't brought me inside, everything would be different. The Vespids might have won." "Humanity, fuck yeah," Evan quipped, using the old Earth expression that had become something of a colony motto. Loera laughed, the sound like music in the cold air. "Indeed, though I'd say it's more like humanity and Luminari, fuck yeah." "Not as catchy," he teased, pulling her closer. Below them, in the colony that had become a beacon of interspecies cooperation, old Max dozed contentedly by Sarah's feet in the thaw, now expanded to welcome both human and Luminari patrons. The aging dog had become something of a legend. the faithful companion who had helped save two civilizations simply by warming a freezing alien girl on a cold Niflheim night. As Evan and Loera sealed their future with a kiss beneath the dancing lights, the legacy of that simple act of kindness continued to unfold across the stars, a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and the unexpected bonds that could form even in the harshest environments.